As someone who knew life before Roe v. Wade and almost died from a stillbirth, we simply cannot go back to those days. That is why Democrats in Congress have put together House Resolution 1386 to condemn Project 2025 because this plan cannot go into effect. But this future is almost certain it will be a reality under another Trump administration. So we want to get the word out to you and your neighbors so that you know what is at stake in November. We have brought together some of the top national experts for our panel tonight. Our 6 experts will speak to you and answer your questions about every aspect of Project 2025. We will cover our economy, our freedoms, our democracy, our environment, healthcare, Social Security, immigration, education, labor, and everything in between. We will be taking as many questions from the audience as we can possibly do it live right on this event. If you have a question, you can press *3 on your phone keypad at any time, and you will be placed in line to speak with a member of our staff. They will take down your name and question. If you are watching the live stream, just go to our website. You can simply type your name and question in the box below the streaming player. We will do our best to answer as many questions as we possibly can this evening, and you don't have to wait until we get to the question period. You may start submitting your questions now. We receive a lot of questions on our live events. So if you are not able to address your question, please leave a voicemail after the event and call my office at 305-690-5905. Again, if you have any questions throughout this event, please press *3 on your keypad or type them below the streaming player online. Now, I want to turn it over to our Gen Z Congressman, Congressman Maxwell Frost of Florida, to talk about how Project 2025 will affect our next generation of young people and everyday Floridians. Welcome, Maxwell. Welcome.
Thank you so much, and it's such a blessing to be on here with so many amazing experts on this very important issue that we must talk about, and also the legendary and the illustrious Congresswoman Frederica Wilson. Thank you so much for inviting me to be on here. It's such an honor and a blessing. And hello, everybody. I don't want to take up too much time because definitely want to leave time to some of our amazing experts here to answer your questions and talk about Project 2025. But I want to hone in specifically on young Americans and even more specifically on parts of Project 2025 that anger me and scare me the most. And obviously, a lot of Project 2025 is a laundry list of a lot of conservative platforms and policies that we all know about. But the parts of Project 2025 that really anger me the most have to do with the fact that the right wing has wised up to the fact that this young generation and Gen Z in the last election cycle voted to the tune of 70% for Democrats, 70% for politicians who are going to protect their right to choose, make sure that they're doing stuff to end gun violence, ensuring that we actually have an accessible right to vote in this country and that we're protecting our democracy. It turns out young people don't like authoritarianism, and young people like democracy. They like their rights. They like being safe in school and on their blocks and in their community. And so some of the worst actors on the right wing see this massive shift of young voters wanting to vote for pro-democracy candidates and Democratic candidates. And so they're scrambled, say, what are we going to do? What are we going to do to ensure that no matter where this young generation goes in terms of the shift of their ideology, we consolidate and we keep our power? And those are the parts of Project 2025 that I find the most angering and frightening. The parts that essentially create it so that way there is a permanent conservative stamp on this country, no matter who gets elected. And that is the part of Project 2025 that I think everyone should really be aware of, the subversion of democracy. And as I've been traveling the country over the last few weeks on the campaign side, I've been making sure young people understand that there are elements of this, of Project 2025, that we see being tested and done all across the South, and especially here in the state of Florida. 40% of the books banned in this entire country in 2023 were banned in the state of Florida, right? Right now, if Ron DeSantis has a problem with you as a local elected official, or my state attorney, Monique Worrell, he'll just suspend you, and then he'll put in one of his own people to be there. Stacking these courts, so that way, usually one of the only usually one of the only forms of recourse we have in this state is litigation. Stacking the courts and making sure that it's not just filled with conservatives, but filled with conservatives who are looking out for a specific political party and specific politicians. All of this is a part of stacking the cards and changing the system, so democracy means less, or our voices mean less, and really all this power is consolidated around specific individuals. The last thing I'll say here too, there's a reason why the right wing has focused in a lot on public education. Again, they see this young generation as voting for other politicians, and they want to try to change the way young people think, make us very well adjusted to injustice. It's why they're banning books. It's why we see laws like Don't Say Gay. It's why they're intentionally sabotaging the public education system. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, and they can see it fail. So they can say, look, that's why we need to privatize education in this country. All of this is part of this grand view that they have of the country that they believe should be modeled under white supremacy and Christian nationalism and all these things that we don't want in this country. I was born and raised Southern Baptist. I am a Southern Baptist. I believe I should be on the front lines of fighting Christian nationalism, which means I have to be on the front lines of also fighting things like Project 2025. And the last thing I'll say is it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat, Republican, independent, whatever, conservative, liberal, progressive, we should all be concerned when there are people in this country that have created a plan to subvert our democracy and to make our voices mean less in this country that was founded on the principles of all of us having a voice and all those voices being weighed equally. And that is what Project 2025 is all about. That it doesn't matter who you vote for in the future. They want to make it so it doesn't matter that stamp of white supremacy and conservative ideals are just on this country. And if we allow someone like Donald Trump, and even beyond Donald Trump, just politicians, to enact significant portions of Project 2025, it is going to be very difficult to undo that and help save our democracy. You know, people should know the United States a few years ago was placed on the list of backsliding democracies. And part of the reason is, number one, the people are losing faith in our institutions. And part of that is because of the leaders of these institutions that are publicly saying, we want to restrict your right to vote. We want to subvert democracy. We want to make your voice mean less. That you have all these problems. Give me more power, and I will take care of you. And that is not what this country is about. And so thank you so much, Congresswoman Frederica Wilson, for having me on. Young Americans should be very, very aware of Project 2025. Of course, the laundry list of platform ideas, very conservative ideas, but also the subversion of our democracy that all Americans, not just Democrats, all Americans should be very concerned about. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you. Thank you, Congressman Frost, for those extremely riveting remarks. So everyone now knows how dangerous Project 2025 is. So let me show you how Project 2025 looks. This is the actual document, 920 pages that they have worked on to destroy this nation. Let's take a look at how thick this is and how long it took for them to put together this dangerous, foul publication. And President Trump is now trying to back away from it, but it's too late. His fingerprints are all over Project 2025. And now I want to turn it over to our moderator, who will guide the rest of our discussion. Mike Zamore is the National Director of Policy and Government Affairs at the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU. Mike was a 22-year veteran on Capitol Hill before joining the ACLU, and he has co-authored Filibustered: How to Fix the Broken Senate and Save America. And he is an adjunct faculty member at American University's Washington College of Law. He has read Project 2025 cover to cover. For that, he deserves a round of applause. And he has written extensively about it. So I will pass the microphone to him to guide the rest of our discussion with our panel of experts. Thank you so much, Mike.
Florida, very glad to be with you to talk about Project 2025 today. As the Congresswoman mentioned, my name is Mike Zamore. I'm the National Director of Policy and Government Affairs at the ACLU. Just a bit of housekeeping. I want to remind everybody that as we get into our discussion here amongst the panel, we'll be waiting to take your questions at the end of that discussion period. So please, if you've got questions, press *3 on your phone at any time, and you can get your questions into the mix. I want to now introduce our excellent lineup of experts here, and we have with us the mayor, former mayor of Miami Beach, Dan Gelber, who's going to be speaking about environment and energy. To speak on immigration, we've got the incoming executive director of Americans for Immigrant Justice, Sui Chung. On healthcare, we've got the director of health policy from the Center for American Progress, Natasha Murphy. And we will be having join us shortly the president of the American Federation of Teachers, Randy Weingarten, who will be speaking to education and labor in Project 2025. And then on the economy and how Project 2025 may hit you around in your pocketbooks and around the breakfast table, we'll have the president of the National Urban League, Mark Morial. Before we get to these illustrious experts, I'm going to take a couple of minutes and just speak to how Project 2025 will impact our basic freedoms. And Congressman Frost spoke to this a little bit, but I wanted to start by making plain what Project 2025 is. And fundamentally, this is a plan for politicians and bureaucrats to control our lives and loot our national wealth. They want to decide whether you have to carry a pregnancy to term. They think they know better than you who you are and how you introduce yourself to the world. They want to separate children from parents in mass deportation, invasions of churches and schools and hospitals. We'll be hearing more about those specific impacts from this panel. But I'll point out that creating a white nationalist, theocratically inspired tax haven for plutocrats is not a terribly popular agenda. And that's why a big part of Project 2025 is also taking away our most fundamental right. And that's the right to shape the country that we live in, right? The big first three words of the Constitution, extra oversized script is "we the people." It's supposed to be our government. That was the major innovation of this country. We've never fully honored that vision, of course, but Project 2025 is determined to take us in the opposite direction and remove our control over the country that we live in and the policies of our government. So what we would see under Project 2025 is a continued assault on voting that we have all experienced. Certainly, Florida has seen barriers thrown up to voting. Certainly targeting underrepresented communities, younger people, folks like that. We'll see all of that in spades. And then what we will see that would be somewhat new is Project 2025 really tees up the authoritarians' playbook of harnessing the vast power of the state, of the government, to target political opponents and stifle dissent. So Project 2025 calls for breaking the independence of the Department of Justice, of the IRS and FBI and other enforcement agencies. And instead of having those entities that have enforcement and investigative power using those really kind of powerful tools in service of the rule of law and the needs and benefits of the people, we will see them harnessed to support the agenda of the president. So in places like Hungary and elsewhere, we've seen democratic backsliding look like tax audits of independent media companies to try to shut them down. We've seen politically motivated prosecutions. We all know the sordid history of police going after drivers of color for broken taillights and using that as an excuse to search a vehicle, right? That kind of pretextual policing is what we would see at a mass level, targeting organizations and political opponents. So, it won't be taillights, but it'll be, did you file the proper paperwork on for imports or exports, or did you pay all the taxes on time, or did you do the permitting that was required in connection with some environmental project? Like all these things that may or may not be like technical violations, but would never be prosecuted or never be pursued to the same extent, but for the ideology or interests of the target. So it goes really to the heart of our First Amendment rights: the right to protest, our freedom of association, our freedom to tell the government to go to hell. If you have to worry that telling the government to go to hell means a death penalty for your organization, or that you will be bankrupted with legal fees, people will think twice. And that's really the heart of the agenda. It's to get people to self-censor, to get people to take the pragmatic course of not challenging the government, not going after the investigations or the organizing. We're not really going to be able to count on the courts. We all know the courts are already pretty compromised, but much of this is also, there are pretexts. There are ways to pursue technical violations, but use them in a way that signals loudly and clearly to everybody else, you do not want to be on the wrong side of the government, so you better keep your head down and your nose clean. This approach relies on dividing and conquering us, and relies on each of our instincts for self-preservation. And if we get to this place where Project 2025 is in place, we're going to be in trouble. It's going to be really hard. We're going to need to band together to call out pretextual investigations and prosecutions for what they are, and to back each other up, even when we may not be the one in the government's sites at the moment. But the better solution is just to not let Project 2025 ever come into being. So one of the reasons we're all here, and I know that the Congresswoman called this meeting, is to make sure people understand what is at stake and to rally folks to prevent Project 2025 from descending our country into its dystopian vision. So we are ready now to kind of turn to our expert panel and talk about some of the specific ways that Project 2025 is going to impact the issues that so many of us care about. And we're going to start with healthcare. So I'm going to turn the conversation now to Natasha Murphy, who, as I mentioned, is the Health Policy Director at the Center for American Progress. And Natasha, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mike, and good evening, everyone. As was shared, I'm Natasha Murphy, the Health Policy Director at CAP, which is an independent, nonpartisan policy institute based in Washington, D.C., and is dedicated to improving the lives of all Americans through bold and progressive ideas. Earlier this summer, CAP launched a new series entitled Project 2025, Exposing the Far-Right Assault on America, where our in-house policy experts in the document and detail their potential for harm. And so this evening, I want to highlight what those potentials are to harm our healthcare and public health system. First of which, Project 2025 restricts reproductive freedom. The document calls for the Food and Drug Administration to restrict access to mifepristone, which is one of 2 drugs that are used to administer medication abortion. And it also instructs the U.S. Department of Justice to misapply the Comstock Act, a pair of laws from 1873 and 1909 that would criminalize the mailing of medication abortion. In addition to that, Project 2025 seeks to eliminate some emergency contraceptive medications from the ACA's preventive care requirements. As a result, more than 48 million women, including 607,000 Floridian women, face losing guaranteed access to free emergency contraception. In addition to that, Project 2025 threatens Medicaid coverage. As it relates to Medicaid, Project 2025 threatens to change the federal funding mechanism and changing the financing structure to create block grants and per capita caps that would limit the ability for individuals to seek care. Project 2025 also seeks to implement work requirements, onerous and honestly harmful requirements that would further disrupt individuals' eligibility and their coverage. If enacted, these types of proposals would likely result in tens of millions of Americans becoming uninsured or underinsured, reducing access to essential health care and long-term services, particularly for low-income children, families, seniors, and people with disabilities. Project 2025 also threatens Medicare prescription drug pricing reforms and would upend vaccine access for older adults. By intending to repeal the Inflation Reduction Act, including those historic prescription drug negotiation provisions and other elements that have helped to lower out-of-pocket costs for Medicare enrollees, Project 2025 would gut a lot of the savings that have really impactful for older adults. So we're talking about $7.4 billion in missed savings for Medicare Part D enrollees. In addition to that, there would be 52 million beneficiaries who would no longer have access to the free vaccines that they need to prevent things like pneumonia and shingles. In addition to that, more than 1 million Medicare beneficiaries would be facing higher out-of-pocket costs for their prescription drugs. Overall, Project 2025 represents a broad assault on the healthcare and public health system in this country that is so crucial to protecting American lives and American health. It's really crucial that we remain vigilant and advocate for policies that are going to safeguard health and healthcare rather than diminish it. So I appreciate the opportunity to share some of those honestly concerning and dangerous proposals that have the opportunity to really threaten our healthcare system. And I'm looking forward to the rest of the presentations as well as the opportunity to answer questions. So back to you, Mike.
Thank you, Natasha. It is definitely chilling, and all of us require healthcare, and Project 2025's vision of making it harder to get and more expensive, or even blocking it altogether is terrifying. As a reminder for folks who are just tuning in, we're taking questions after we hear from our experts. If you have a question, you can press *3 on your phone at any time, and you'll be placed in line to speak with one of Congresswoman Wilson's staff members and be able to get your question into the mix to ask our panel. We're now going to hear from the former mayor of Miami Beach, Dan Gelber, who's going to talk about Project 2025 and the impact on our environment. Mayor Gelber, I'll turn it over to you.
For having me here, and I want to, of course, thank. I was fortunate enough to serve in the state senate with the same woman who is now my Congresswoman, Frederica Wilson, and she's always been one of my personal heroes and friends, and it's of course expected, and we have great gratitude for her putting this together. So this is sort of simple. If you want more heat, more floods, more severe winds, and a more expensive world, if you want to leave a world much worse than how we found it, then Project 2025 is for you, because that's exactly what it will do. I was mayor for 6 years, and I've represented this city in the legislature, Miami Beach of its city. It's well known, but a lot of people don't know. It's built out of porous limestone. It sits at sea level. And so for my residents, we've never really debated climate change. We've never really had that debate because we've seen sunny day flooding. We see the waters rise. We see how hot it is. And we've done as much as we can to address it, raising our roads, spending a ton of money, trying to make our city livable, passable, so that trucks can move and police and ambulances can go places and people can get to their homes. We have this issue in a real way, and we've been addressing it. The first thing that's going to happen is all of the things that have been done under the Biden administration to address climate change are going to be rolled back. I think probably the most important thing the Biden administration did was to sign the Inflation Reduction Act to make sure that went through in 2022, which was the most comprehensive climate law the U.S. has ever seen. Hundreds of billions of dollars in clean energy, electric vehicles, environmental justice, so much affecting everybody. That's going to all be rolled back. So we're going to start to do things in our country that literally goes in exactly the opposite direction on something that my residents have always known is pretty clear. I think July 22nd or mid-July was the hottest day in history, and that July was the hottest July in history. And I'm certain this August and September will be the hottest months in history, as it will be next year. The Earth is getting hotter. Climate change is real. And the Biden administration did some pretty important things. It got us back into the Paris Accords and the Paris Agreement, so that we were leading instead of lagging behind countries in the world that were trying to reduce their greenhouse gases. But some of the things that Project 2025 will do is a little bit subtle, but terrible. For instance, they have this thing that we're going to essentially make everybody in the administration what's called a Schedule F, which is reclassifying of government workers so that they can be hired and fired very easily by the president. So there's really no protections for them. And what's going to happen, and it's pretty clear they want to do this from the report, is that they're going to start to take away from government people who believe that the world is getting hotter and that we need to do something about it. They're going to get rid of those scientists. They're going to get rid of the folks that have been working so hard to create emission standards, to promote electric vehicles, to make it easier to live in what is a much hotter world right now. And that's going to change dramatically the direction of our country. Now, for those of you who just think it's about being hotter, it's really not. In my community and in my state, probably the biggest cost driver these days is hurricane insurance. It's something that most fixed income people didn't expect to see. Even if you rent and you don't own a home, you pay it as a pass-through. And there is no question that with projections for greater and more substantial hurricanes, or just simply floods and what we call in my city rain bombs, those things are going to make housing even more unaffordable for people, because no bank is going to insure something that is not wind resistant and flood resistant. So that's going to be something that's very real. And of course, we're going to see more of those as the world gets hotter and as the seas get hotter, because that's what creates the hurricanes that are so frightening to us here in South Florida and frankly in a lot of states. in the Southeast United States. So you're going to see that happen if Project 2025 occurs. The other thing is that they're going to downsize the National Weather Service and leave that to private industries. They're going to start reducing all of the things we've done to promote electric vehicles, and it's not just locally and domestically. They're going to change the focus, which has been to move away from fossil fuels back to fossil fuels internationally. So the U.S. Agency for International Development under 2025 would cease its ability to go after fossil fuels in developing nations where some of the pollution is the very worst, because there are no regulations. And what it will do to the Environmental Protection Agency, because they've said, and they've told already the top executives, that they're going to eliminate that agency's ability to regulate the things that protect everyday Americans. And so that is what you can expect. And that is the problem. I watched really the Biden administration Harris administration do so many important things to cut greenhouse gas emissions. They achieved the notion of having a 2030 50% reduction in those emissions. Those are the things that are causing climate change. If we don't reverse this, if we don't reverse what is happening to our world, then most certainly not only will we be feeling a hotter and a more dangerous and costly world, but our children and grandchildren will face a world that, frankly, we would not want to imagine. And shame on us for leaving them that world. So for me, this may be the most consequential thing we need to do, is to protect our environment, to protect our climate, to protect our people and our children. And this Project 2025 will all but guarantee we do not do that, because it is a short-term approach to a world that really needs long-term solutions. So I hope everybody informs themselves about this. I hope they treat this with the import that it needs to be. And I want to bless my Congressman, Frederica Wilson, for hosting this event, because frankly, information is power in the world, and she is giving you power by bringing people together to let you know what is happening right now. Thank you.
Well said. Thank you for highlighting those dangers, Mayor Gelber. Very much appreciate it. We're now going to turn to Sui Chung, who's the incoming executive director at Americans for Immigrant Justice, and she'll talk about how Project 2025 is going to impact our immigration system and all the families who are immigrants or are in are mixed status, and how we can think differently about a vision for how our country will treat our newest arrivals. Sweet.
Thank you so much, Mike, and thank you to the Congresswoman. It is such an honor to be here. I really appreciate the invitation, and thank you to the distinguished panelists. Again, my name is Sui Chung. I'm Executive Director for Americans for Immigrant Justice. We are based in Miami, Florida. Americans for Immigrant Justice is an award-winning nonprofit law firm that fights for justice for immigrants through a combination of direct representation, impact litigation, advocacy, and outreach. So Mike did allude to some of the concepts already that will be a direct attack on immigrants or perceived immigrants. And I will go into some more detail about that. I think that first and foremost, the level of mass detention and deportations is incredibly frightening. It would be large-scale raids across the country, not specific to border areas, but across the country, and a roundup and detention of millions of immigrants who have been living, working, contributing to the economy, and have been members of our community for decades. This includes Dreamers. And for those of you who don't know who Dreamers are, people who have come to the United States as children, have lived essentially their entire lives here. Millions would be forced into detention camps, including temporary structures like tents, and then mass deportations would commence. Mike already referenced raids at schools, hospitals, religious zones. These raids right now are prohibited. They're sensitive or protected zones, and all of that will be undone. So, so many will be vulnerable, families, children, individuals seeking medical care. It's a very dangerous situation. Many of our immigrants and immigrant families would be reluctant to seek medical care. We saw some of that with SB 1718 in Florida, where hospitals were now being asked to have individuals report their immigration status. So it was frightening for people to seek immigration care, or I'm sorry, medical care, for fear that their immigration status would be reported and it would be used against them. There will be attacks on legal immigration. So barring certain nationalities from work, from student visas, there would be an elimination of DACA, deferred action for childhood arrivals. Family-based immigration provisions some will be eliminated, including petitions for parents of U.S. citizens. There will be a reduction in protections in the United States, such as political asylum claims. Human rights protections will be severely impacted, and temporary protected status will be eliminated, which is a very large piece and fabric of the South Florida and Florida communities. We have TPS for El Salvador, Haiti, Honduras, Nicaragua, Venezuela. TPS would be eliminated. Another category that would be eliminated would be victims of crime, including those who are victims of violent crimes in the United States, those who have cooperated with law enforcement and helped prosecutions move forward, thereby helping keep our communities safer. Visas for those subjected to abuse and human trafficking in the United States would be eliminated. And family separation would be ramped up. Important benefits for unaccompanied children would be eliminated, and large-scale detention of young children would move forward. We saw that during the prior administration. It was very heartbreaking. I think many of you, the public, responded to that. That coming back, I think, would be very catastrophic for our country. Because it had tremendous impact. Many families still remain separated to this day from that prior administration separation of families. Instead of allowing immigrants to see a judge, there would be a suspension of due process and legal protections. There would be fast-track deportations, expedited deportations, immediate expulsion of immigrants. And then if there are backlogs or so-called loss of operational control, the immediate expulsions would occur. It requires ICE to remove, arrest, and detain immigration violators anywhere in the country and without a warrant. Local law enforcement would participate in immigration enforcement actions. Jurisdictions that do not comply would be penalized. And there would be use of military. Project 2025 encourages the use of U.S. military against peaceful immigrants arriving to the United States. Project 2025 targets immigrants, perceived immigrants, families, children, and the well-being, security, and safety of all Americans. I want to just reinforce some of the earlier comments, which is just as a community, we have to be aware and alert, and as a unified community, resist this attack on the people of the United States. And the more we speak, educate, and thank you again, Congresswoman Wilson. I know it's possible for us to create our own narrative with the help of citizens, non-citizens, neighbors, friends, in order to push back against this injustice. Thank you.
Thank you, sweet. Appreciate you sharing all that information. I want to remind everybody that if you would like to ask a question of our panel after we're through the speaking program here, we would love to take it, and you can press *3 on your phone or enter a question on the screen under the live stream if you're watching the live stream. So please get your questions into the mix. I now want to turn things over to the president of the National Urban League, Mark Morial. We're grateful. I know that you've got a lot happening in your life right now. And we're grateful that you're taking a few minutes to join here. And I just want to let folks know that, unfortunately, Mark's got a hard stop, so he will not be here for the question and answer period. But we're very lucky to have him join for some remarks to talk about how Project 2025 is going to affect your pocketbooks and the economic issues that are so central to everybody's life. So, President Morial.
Hey, thank you very much, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to be with all of you this evening, and grateful to Representative Wilson for convening this important discussion. And we cannot do enough to educate people about Project 2025. I'll cut right to the chase. Project 2025 is a declaration of hate, contempt, and division. It walks, talks, smells, just like the Dixie Manifesto or the Southern Manifesto, which was put out by some 100 members of Congress and the United States Senate in the year after the Brown versus the Board of Education decision. That manifesto's mantra was segregation today, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever. This is 900 pages of rubbish. It is not even worthwhile as a legitimate policy document, but make no mistake about it. The people behind it, the Heritage Foundation and others, are serious about staging this coup in America to impose this blueprint for the country on the nation. It is a pile of rubbish. Now, specifically, a few things I want to speak about. First of all, it proposes the elimination of the Department of Education, which was created specifically to try to help those who were locked out and left out to achieve education or to achieve educational equity. Number two, it proposes the complete and wholesale elimination of the Minority Business Development Agency. Number three, it calls on the Department of Justice, and hear this, to prosecute any company, state or local government, nonprofit or university that has a DE&I policy. Note, I said prosecute. In effort, when I think about this in true context, it is an effort to create a police state. Now today, we heard an announcement from the 45th president who's seeking to become the 47th president, that he was going to put Elon Musk in charge of, quote, an initiative to conduct a comprehensive audit of the United States government. What is that? He's now saying, I'm going to put Elon Musk in charge of implementation of Project 2025. So on one hand, you hear, I'm not interested in this, I'm going to walk away from it. On the other hand, now it's being rebranded, repositioned as we're going to do this massive audit of the government. I firmly believe that the more people hear, whether it's on immigration, or civil rights, whether it's on economic policy, the more people hear, the more they will be repulsed by Project 2025, the more they will rise up against Project 2025. And we must be aware of the politics of deception, which is people saying, well, I'm not really in support of Project 2025, and they're going to double back and propose pieces of it with new names. This is a danger to this country. a danger to this country, and it is designed to put oligarchs, a handful of well-resourced, moneyed people in charge. It's designed to build a wall that separates, quote, anyone that is an other from access to the American dream. So I know in this instance, we all agree. I just want to issue a call to action. And that is wherever we go, wherever we have an opportunity to speak, that we push back and we inform people that this is the plan. This is the manifesto. This is the blueprint. And the proponents of it are serious about it. They invested time and money and work into it. And we must rise up against it with as much power and force as we can because of its danger. Because it is an effort to remake this country in a way that none of us agree to, but which is also inconsistent with the work of the last 50, 60, 70 years. This Project 2025 says repeal the last 70 years. Everything since Brown. Everything since the Civil Rights Act. Repeal it. If you look even deeper, it says let's repeal the entire 20th century. It's a danger to the kind of nation you and I want to build, a multicultural, multi-religious American democracy that everyone can be a part of. That's what we want to build. Project 2025 is a threat to that. So I hope we will do the work we need to do. I'm proud to be in concert and in collaboration with each and every one of you. Let us be as energized as possible to go out and defeat this and push back on it and shed light on it. Light is what it needs. You know, when you flip the switch and you turn on the light, all the roaches come out. And that's what we're doing tonight.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate those powerful words.
Thank you.
Important reminder to everybody about the stakes.
Mike, I want to say something.
Sure, please, by all means.
Yeah.
Your show.
Mark, this is for Mark.
Yes.
I just wanted to thank you, especially for hopping on today. Let me just say my thoughts and prayers are with you and your precious family as your mother passed away yesterday. Your mom was a magnificent civil rights activist and an inspiration to all of us. And I know that she is so very proud of you and will continue to be proud of you. So I know you probably rather be somewhere else tonight, but I thank you. America thanks you for still being with us tonight. And we are all here for you. God bless you, and God bless your family.
That means a lot to me. Thank you very much. Yes, and my mom was 91, a classmate at BU with Dr. King. Met my father a week and a half after the Brown versus Board decision. And the rest is history in terms of what they did together. And thank you for those kind words.
Thank you.
Thank you. She sounds like an extraordinary woman.
Thank you.
Very glad to have you here with us tonight. We also are lucky to have with us one of the leading voices in labor and in education in the country, president of the American Federation of Teachers, Randy Weingarten. So Randy, thanks very much for batting cleanup here for us. Just a reminder before we turn it over that you can push *3 on your phone to get connected to the Congresswoman's staff and ask a question for our panel following Randy's comments. And so please have at it. And Randy, thanks so much for being with us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mike. And it's hard to follow Mark today. And I'm just honored to be with all of you. And I'm honored to be with Representative Wilson. I would do virtually anything Representative Wilson asked me to do. And so I'm honored that she's laughing. I'm honored to be here. But I think Mark said something, you know, I'm going to talk about Project 2025 as it affects education. But I think Mark said something about Elon Musk that I want to just dig deeper into, which is, why does Elon Musk basically go from supporting Joe Biden in 2020 and saying that, whatever words he said about Trump, and now all of a sudden in 2024, he not only, after he takes over Twitter, he's now supporting whole hog. I mean, I think that the entire Twitter or X site is a campaign contribution, and I'm wondering why somebody is not exploring that. Certainly seems to exceed every single limit imaginable, given what he's doing. But why now? Why Peter Thiel now? It's follow the money here, which is who wrote Project 2025, who is behind it. Thiel and Musk, in my judgment, what they want is just like big tech controlled the internet and social media. Think about new media and old media. Old media, because there were Democratic representatives and presidents, they actually regulated to create fair use of TV, of radio, of other kinds of old media. And look at new media. Look how fractured it is. Look how it can say anything it wants anytime. And with AI coming, look what Thiel and look what Musk want. They want what the robber barons, as Tim Walsh often says, a fellow social studies teacher, AP social studies teacher, we used to teach, are these folks captains of industry or robber barons? What they want is they want to control the economy from the top down. They want to have all the power. And Musk wants all the power of AI without having any of the limitations. And he thinks that Trump is going to give it to him. And that's why he's whole hog, in my estimation, about Trump, as opposed to what we're trying to do, which is trying to actually use the positives of AI, but not let people like Musk or Trump or others invade people's privacy, take jobs away from people, try to do the kinds of things that they do with disinformation and misinformation, like we just saw in Tennessee today. So what's happening is, if you look at the details of Project 2025, as Mark just laid out, and as so many others laid out, it is control of the economy. It's control of our minds. It's control of our bodies. It's taking away freedoms from regular folks, taking away education, which I'm about to get to, from poor and middle class folks. And who are the big beneficiaries? The rich and the well-heeled. Now, I don't begrudge them, but ultimately, when, as Bernie Sanders says, when the three wealthiest people in the United States of America have more money than the bottom 60 or 70%, something is wrong with that. When in Florida, as the Floridians know so well, you can't get insurance because Ron DeSantis's Florida, you can't actually make sure your house is okay if there's a hurricane. And who's the beneficiaries? The big insurance companies. So what Project 2025 does about education is really venal, because it makes the rich the big winners with vouchers for everyone, even though we now know that what happens is, when you have these kind of vouchers for everyone, the private schools hike up their tuitions. And so essentially the vouchers become a tax break for the rich. That's what we've seen in the Florida voucher program. That's what we've seen in the Arizona voucher program, the Iowa voucher program. But that is their education policy. And in this instance, Donald Trump fully embraces it. He doesn't say, oh no, I don't believe in Project 2025, even though we know that Vance and he have operatives who wrote it and that Vance has actually written the forward for it. So, but on education, he has totally embraced it. And what do they take away? They take away, and Representative Wilson was a school teacher. When I say Title I or IDEA, she knows, as does every other parent and school teacher who has used the services of Title I or IDEA know. They cut Title I. That means they cut all sorts of millions and millions and millions of dollars of the money that goes to poor kids for food, for tutoring, for books, for technology. They're going to cut all of IDEA. What does that mean? The money that goes for kids with disabilities. They're going to cut Head Start. What does that mean? Cutting the preschool programs. We need to build preschool programs. We need to build childcare. They want to cut all of that. They're going to cut all the student loan and the student loan cancellation programs, including the ones that have been passed by Congress. What does that mean? It means that families for whom they, kids right now at the first generation to go to college, they will have to deal with this burdensome debt themselves instead of having it mitigated. So if you take one more, and what are they going to do in terms of any civil rights laws? Get rid of them. The states can do it. Could you imagine for 1 second Ron DeSantis's Florida calling balls and strikes in terms of civil rights? All of them gone. So it's not that they just want to get rid of the Department of Education. They want to get rid of everything that we have done since the 1960s, since Johnson's War on Poverty, to help level the playing field and create a ladder of opportunity for poor and middle class kids. And what do they want to do? This is what I said at the beginning. They want to give it as vouchers. That which they keep, they want to give as vouchers. So a tax cut for the rich and wealthy kids can have an education, and everybody else is on their own. And that's why it's so venal. And then on top of it, they take all of their culture war stuff to create fear and dystopia for teachers. So they want to ban books, but more than ban books, they want to say to teachers and to librarians, you can read this in the 900 pages. They want to say, if they have decided that any books that you have or anything that you do is pornographic in their view, and that could be, look, I'm a gay person, I'm a lesbian, that could be pornographic in their view, that you would have to register as a sexual offender. And since they're not going to define it because it's going to be in their view, the vagueness is the point to try to create a chilling effect on every teacher in America to not be able, and every librarian in America, to not be able to engage with kids and create the engagement that we need. So that's what Project 2025 is. It's venal, it's anti-education, it's anti-family, and it's anti-people. And I agree with everybody who's spoken before. We have to make sure people understand what it is and the rights that they are taking away from people, and particularly people in the South who get more of the Title I funds and the IDEA funds than the blue states. The red states actually get more. Rural areas and deep urban areas actually get more. They're taking it away from the people who they think are voting for them because they're creating the fear of all of us. We got to fight back. We got to fight for our democracy. We have to fight for our freedoms. We have to fight for opportunity. And I know we're talking about Project 2025, but I'm going to say one more thing, which is the opposite is what you hear from Representative Wilson, Representative Frost, from Kamala Harris, from Tim Walz, about turning the page and actually creating opportunity, doing things that actually show our future is ahead of us and that we are helping kids rise to their God-given potential. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Randy. The very very well said, and we are facing really significant challenge here, and I think we're all clear on where the angels sit and what we need to do about it. So we have now a chance to go to questions. I want to remind everybody it is not too late, so feel free to go to *3 on your phone and ask a question, engage our panel here and the Congresswoman. I want to start with the moderator's prerogative and ask a question of Sui, because I think it's really important as we talk about this 900 pages and this, all the various things that this document, this plan would do, to really think about how it impacts real people and real families. And so you talked a lot about what the sort of deportation apparatus would look like under Project 2025. And I wanted to talk about the implications of that, in particular for mixed status families. So we know there's millions of kids, American citizen children, who live with undocumented parents. And we know that also, as you described, there would be all kinds of efforts to really step up the like immigration raids and go to places that are currently off limits to deport people. And I'm just wondering if you could talk about what would happen to those kids if deportation raid happens at work one day while their kids are at school and mom or dad is at work, and suddenly ICE shows up, and kind of paint a picture for us about what the implications are for families.
Yes. Okay. Thanks, Mike. Unfortunately, it's not something that is unusual or surprising, throughout history that that this hasn't happened before. It has happened. And, even regardless of the administration, regardless of the moment, we always prepare clients, having personal plans and decisions. It's a really scary thing to go to work one day and believe that you might not come home to your children. Who's going to take care of them? Do they have extended family members? Do people have permission even to come on campus and pick up children? Do they have the ability to make medical care decisions? And, I think the worst of it, this is day to day in South Florida, families who parents that don't have driver's licenses or have a driving violation of some sort, and then something happens to them so that they're not able to attend to their children who just happily went to school. But I think the worst of what we saw was during the prior administration's separation of children from their parents. And just the catastrophic damage that was done to families, to children and their mental state, very, very young children. And, those circumstances were very extreme in the fact that many of them continue to be separated and with no hope of, very little hope of reunification, because many parents did decide, yes, I will be deported so long as you give me my child back. And, once they were gone, they were gone. And there was no tracking of the children. There was no proper record keeping. And so there was no plan in place to match children back with their parents. So, we're seeing two sides of it. When, Mike, when you talk about mixed status families, there are families where 2, 3, 5 children are U.S. citizens, and a parent may not be maybe a non-citizen. And so, we're talking about really two extreme examples where families could be tremendously impacted, families that are trying to seek protection and safety and coming from incredibly violent and dangerous places on one hand, and then in another instance, families that have been a part of the Florida community for years and years and years, and have businesses. So it really is, I think, difficult for those who do have the privilege of citizenship to imagine just kind of the disappearance of a parent, from a young child or a child, or maybe even an adult child. It is tremendously impactful on families. So we do encourage people, have a plan in place, have a system in place, somebody who has legal authorization to make decisions for you as well as your children. It's really important to have these personal matters organized.
Thank you. It's sobering to have to think about having a plan like that. And I know it's a reality for so many families. I want to go to a question for Dan from Jim in Miami, who wanted to understand a little bit more about how Project 2025 would affect flooding in cities. I think that's your expertise.
Well, it's only my expertise because I had a lot of residents who've experienced it, and I'm experiencing it now and again. Well, first of all, obviously everybody's aware of the changes in weather. You know, it's pretty obvious that you're getting more severe, hotter storms, which get more hurricanes, which get more floods. We have these things called rain bombs now. And what had happened is, and what 2025 is going to do, it's going to roll back all of the advancements that the Biden administration made, specifically and most especially through the Inflation Reduction Act, because that did a whole lot of things to, and the infrastructure bills as well, because what they did is they created a sense that we've got to gird against this, and it promoted it through the billions of dollars that was going not just to the states, but then more importantly, the counties and cities. You know, it's interesting, in my state, former Governor Rick Scott outlawed the climate change as the phrase being used in documents that the state generated. Think about that. So there was not even a recognition on the state level, and that there was even an issue. And when the Trump administration was there was no recognition on the federal level that you should do anything about flooding. So everything that was done on the local level. We created a local project. Our county mayor, Danielle Levine-Cava, did a countywide project. We had a regional project, but there was no state and there was no federal effort. But under the Biden administration, they have looked at flooding. They've looked at infrastructure advancements. They've tried to build into monies that go out a sense that we've got to be thinking about how we're going to protect not just communities like mine, which are on the front of this issue because we are at sea level, but the communities that are going to face it soon. And the one thing that people forget about, and this is incredibly important, my city of Miami Beach has a $65 billion tax base. We were able to actually do and implement a lot of the things that cost a lot of money, changing our pump system, raising our roads. Those are all things that protect our communities' homes and our way of life. But you are seeing in communities that don't have that tax base an inability to protect themselves. We have sunny day flooding all over Dade County, not just in the coastal area. And when a community that has a more depressed tax base confronts that, there's nothing they can do about it because they just don't have the funds to do it unless the federal government steps in and says, look, we will help you with our roads, but we will also ask that you raise them or that you provide pumping systems or that you do the kinds of things that protect the things that people care most about in their lives after their family and kids and their schools is their home. And that's the one thing that we've seen happen under the Biden-Harris administration, a concern towards that. The Trump administration, as he has said, the second Trump administration is going to reverse all that and in fact create experts whose job is to do the exact opposite of what we're doing right now. So all the advancements we've made, which were sorely needed and critical, are going to be lost. And frankly, we're not at a point where we can afford to wait. There are places in Monroe County, Florida, where for months at a time, there is flooding every single day. There are fish in the middle of an intersection every single day for months at a time. And they're trying to fix that now, but because they waited so long, it's much more costly. And of course, property values plummet, disruption happens, and it's harder to fix when you haven't thought about it in the long term. So the flooding issue is an incredible one. And I see nothing other than higher costs and disruptions of your way of life under this 2025.
Thank you. Appreciate that perspective. Randy, I got a question from Robert in Central Florida who wants to understand more something you alluded to, which is the impact of Project 2025 on student loans. Could you elaborate on that?
Yes. So what has happened over the course of, the last, I'm starting to lose track. I think it was 20 years or so since 2008, 2009, 2010. Because of the last student loan debacle of Sally Mae and others, the federal government, through the education department, now basically is in charge of the whole student loan network. But they basically contracted out to people and to entities. Now it's Mohila, before it was Navient. And so, but they have the regulatory authority to make sure that these people are doing, or these businesses are doing, the right thing. And they also have huge regulatory authority about, making sure that the student debt is not usurious. And just the price gouging that, like, Kamala Harris has talked about now, about medical debt or about grocery stores and things like that, that they're supposed to call balls and strikes. What Project 20, and then separate and apart from that, in 2007, President Bush signed into law a law that was pushed by Hillary Clinton and Ted Kennedy about public service loan forgiveness, so that there was an ability to actually forgive the loans of everybody in public service as an incentive for them to come into public service, whether they were in the Army or they were school teachers or whether they're firefighters, nurses, after 10 years of them staying in that work. Betsy DeVos never implemented the public service loan forgiveness law with any fidelity. In fact, 98% of the people who were entitled to loan forgiveness never got it while she was Secretary of Education. The first thing Joe Biden did was he actually made that law real, and hundreds of thousands of people who were entitled to loan forgiveness after 10 years of being a nurse or in the Army or being a cop or being a firefighter or being a teacher have gotten that forgiveness. But because the law actually allows a lot of this other work, the Biden administration has tried to do a bunch of these other things. Some of it has been tied up in court, some of it has gone forward. What Project 2025 is saying is to get rid of all of it and basically say to students, you're on your own. And if we look at what has happened in terms of affordability of higher education, it essentially is saying to students, if you're a first generation college goer and you can't get the job that you want to get later on, you're going to be really hurt. And we have to, the student loans were supposed to be affordable and ability for first generation college goers or for people who come from families that can't afford that kind of nut of $60,000 a year for their kid to go to college. They shouldn't be shut out of college and opportunity. That's what student loans were supposed to be. And basically, the Project 2025 is saying not only get out of the business of student loans, but go back to a time when somebody could actually basically have usurious loan rates.
Thank you for that. I think I saw a study that suggested that lower income borrowers could see their cost of borrowing their student loan payments triple under Project 2025, which is it's just,
if not
striking.
It would just be completely, I mean, everything that is happening right now, it would just go out the window.
Yeah. Thank you for that explanation. Congresswoman, I've got a question here in the queue that is perfect for you. So one of your constituents, Saresta, is asking, Project 2025 gives Trump, or would give Trump, complete power. What will the House of Representatives do if to prevent it if he is elected?
Well, I think that we have a resolution that we passed, and I suppose my message to everyone listening or watching tonight is we've got to make sure that we vote. We've not talked about that. And the one way to stop Project 2025 is to vote. for the blue, just turn this country blue. And we've got to make sure that people who've never heard of Project 2025, people who don't watch CNN and MSNBC or even local news, people who rely on what their coworkers say or social media, and so much of that is distorted, and AI is changing everything. We have to make it our responsibility to educate our neighbors, our coworkers, our friends, our church members, our people who we meet in the grocery store who are having these conversations about Trump and what he did and what he will do. We have a responsibility to correct them and to give them the information that we're hearing tonight. And that's the purpose of this call, is to educate the community. But it shouldn't stop here at the call. Everyone who's listening should become an ambassador to stop Project 2025. The Congress of the United States, if God forbid, if Trump is elected, it will be very, very difficult. We see this as a man who is unhinged. He doesn't care. He doesn't care about laws. He doesn't care about rules, regulations. He just doesn't care. He's evil, and he doesn't like anyone except people who fit into his category, his stance in life, the very wealthy. So I guess what we need to do as marching orders for everyone listening is give you the responsibility of making sure that you start with your family members, then you branch out to your coworkers, then you branch out to your friends, and you branch out to your relatives, and you make sure that everyone knows what a disastrous piece of information this document is to destroy this nation. And everything that these experts have shared tonight, if you just remember one thing they said, share that. Share that with the people you come in contact with, because one thing that everyone said, just one, is enough to make people understand that this is not something that our country needs at this time. It is amazing at the amount of people that follow Donald Trump. I'm amazed. I'm amazed about what we already know from his first term. You see, I was there January 6th. I experienced what happened. And what I experienced, I just can't understand people who see this over and over again on television. There's been a movie, he's been impeached twice, and they still think he should go back to the White House. I think what a lot of people didn't see that I saw was the statues that were broken in Statuary Hall, that were smeared with feces and blood. The women's bathroom was totally destroyed. The mirrors were snatched off the wall. The sink was snatched out of the wall. The destruction in the Capitol was beyond belief. And we think, not we, but there are people among us who actually believe that someone who was the architect of this horrible day should go back into the White House, someone who's beholden to Putin. And we know that Russia's goal is to destroy America. So that's my take.
Thank you for your passion. We are, I know, already 90 minutes in here, and I'm sure people are feeling it a little bit, but we do have a couple more questions I want to try to get through in a little bit of a speed round, because I know folks took the time to ask. So one of them was from Giovanna, who was asking about housing and the impact of Project 2025 on housing, and I wanted to just briefly touch on that myself and say that Project 2025 envisions restoration of redlining. And the Biden administration put in place new regs to try to make redlining harder to do. Redlining is the process where lenders discriminate based on zip codes, specifically targeting communities of color, or other, quote unquote, detrimental factors that make lending riskier. And for decades, federal housing policy has treated being Black or other low-income communities as being a detrimental factor. So what Project 2025 would do is repeal the Biden rules that said you can't do that, and make redlining easier to do, to target Black and brown borrowers. The other thing that in Project 2025 that's worth noting, and is just absurd if you actually care about trying to make housing more affordable for Americans, is it would allow the federal agencies to sell off land that is currently public housing to developers, and take low income housing that's available to lower and middle income families off the market and repurpose it for other development. So we have this incredible supply challenge in this country right now. There's not nearly enough housing, especially for people who are working living wage jobs, or are struggling to make ends meet. There's a lot of housing that's built for higher income people, but there's just not that much out there for working families. And so the last thing we should be doing is taking that housing off the market. But that's exactly what Project 2025 would do. So I think you could count on, unless you are in the McMansion market, I think you could count on Project 2025 making it even harder to find affordable housing to rent or own. The other question in here that I wanted to make sure that we got to was for Randy. And Randy, you spoke a lot about education. This question is specifically about labor. And as a preeminent union president, I thought you'd be a good person to talk about how Project 2025 will impact labor unions and organizing.
So what Project 2025 does about labor is very similar to what it does about education and does about virtually any other freedom that regular folks have, which is it gets rid of everything. So it says essentially that all the different things that the Biden administration have now tried to do to change the National Labor Relations Law. I mean, forget about what we need to do in terms of modernize the law to make it consistent with how with the jobs of today and tomorrow, and how people who want to organize can organize in those jobs, and so that means really rethinking what employment is, what contracting is, and all of that. So it basically, all the things that we're trying to do, it basically shuts them down. But what it does, it says that the labor law, um, you can fire people. You're not going to be able to use the National Labor Relations Board to call balls and strikes. The Labor Department is going to have huge ability to investigate and to bully. There will be basically anti-labor people put into the National Labor Relations Board. The overtime protections that we've gotten would be gone. The protections on child labor would be gone, and I could kind of go through the list of the different things that the Labor Department now does. Things about heat, like the new heat standard that OSHA just put in, gone. So essentially, all the kind of building blocks that are allowing us to have, for workers to organize without being fired, for us to have quicker elections without management putting an anti-union company in to stop those elections, all that would be gone. And there'd be no, like what's already happened, there'd be no ability because of the overturning of Chevron already, and because of the Glacier case from the Supreme Court a couple of years ago. And even if you go on strike, you may get sued for the impact of going on strike. So the power that unionized employees have to basically say, let's level the playing field and let's actually an employer deal with us, all that leverage, all that power would be gone.
Thank you. So I wanted to wrap this up. I'm afraid that there may be questions that we weren't able to get to, and if that is the case, you should please feel free to leave a voicemail or call Congresswoman Wilson's office at 305-690-5905. We at the ACLU, and I'm sure the other organizations, the Center for American Progress, American Federation of Teachers, National Urban League, and Americans for Immigrant Justice, all have resources available on our websites to learn about Project 2025. Very grateful to everybody who tuned in for this call and listening to this discussion, and especially to Congresswoman Wilson for spearheading this and for her leadership. And Congresswoman, I'll turn it over to you to close things out.
Okay. We're coming to an end, and I want to just thank everyone for tuning in tonight, and we hope that you learned something and grasped a lot of information that you can spread around the community so that we can be better off. We appreciate the opportunity to speak with you tonight, and I want to give a big round of applause and a big thank you to all of our special guests for joining us here tonight for this terrific event. This would not have been possible without your expertise. Thank you for your wisdom, your knowledge, for sharing with all of us, and we certainly appreciate it. District 24 appreciates it, and all of the people who have joined us appreciate your wonderful vision and your genius, I guess we could say. And this is to the audience. If you were not able to get your question answered, you can leave a voicemail after the event or call my office at 305-690-5905. We will host more of these events in the future to keep you informed on what we're working on and other important updates. So stay tuned. Thank you again. Have a good evening. And remember, your responsibility is to vote. Vote blue. Vote Democrat. Vote for Harris Walls. And all up and down the blue Democratic section of the ballot. Thank you. God bless you. And God bless the United States of America.